Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show. I'm your host today, Karen Grogan. We're headed into fall here in the U.S. Hopefully, we'll get some cooler temperatures. Today's guest is Anderson Alves, who is a research associate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And his area of expertise is genetics, and then a research emphasis also in terms of statistical analysis of data and how we generate this data, and then looking at different technologies, which I'm sure he will gladly explain to us during our conversation today. So welcome, Anderson. We'll dig into some of that technology in a minute, but what's your background and how did you get interested in genetics and how did you end up in Wisconsin?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me today. Actually, I was born and raised in Brazil when I started to start my BS in a small city close to my home city. And then during my undergrad, I was kind of interested on how could I get involved into research. And I was pretty much interested on genetics, but at that time it wasn't so many genetics opportunities there. Then I moved to my home state capital for pursuing a master's degree in animal science. But focusing on animal genetics. Then I started studying different quantitative traits, especially in sheep and dairy goats. After that, I went to São Paulo State University for pursuing my PhD, also in animal breeding genetics, but this time working with reproductive traits in beef cattle. At that time, I got pretty much interested on how to apply machine learning for predicting complex traits, especially using genomic information for doing so. And after that, I started working as a professor at the Federal Institute of Education in another state called Maranhão in Brazil. But I was just teaching. What I like to do is to do research. So I got an invitation from Guilherme from the University of Wisconsin to work with him for doing research, working as a research associate here. Then I accepted, and then here I am.
Excellent. And what species are? What is the research focus in the lab that you're working in?
Well, we work with different species, all kind of species, basically. We work with beef cattle, we work with pigs, broiler chickens, especially fish, and we do all kind of data analysis related things to support data-driven decisions in livestock species, since genetic selection. But we are also using high throughput phenotyping techniques for to aid these data-driven decisions in livestock species. So right now I'm leading different projects for understand better how can we measure feed efficiency and feeding behavior traits in broiler chickens, but in group house broiler chickens, which is quite of a challenge.
Okay. So in terms of that, of how you're doing that in broiler chickens, when you mean group house, like are these like pen study types of things, or are you looking at larger models? What type of scale are you looking at this?
Yeah, we are working with data more alike commercial circumstances.
Okay.
So our animals, like thousands of animals roused in the same pen. So
Okay.
Generally we measure feeding, residual feed intake, feed conversion rate in caged broilers because we have to access the individual feed intake, and this is hard, right? So what we were trying to do is to use sensor technology, especially radio frequency identification, to measure in real time the feed intake of the animals, group house animals, which I believe that it's more reflects more the commercial circumstance that we face in the industry, right?
And then, so in terms of the project that you're currently working on, specifically for broilers, do you have research that has been published from that yet, or are you still in the data collection point?
Well, it's relatively assume a new project, so it's been a year that we've been working on that, and yeah, the papers are getting out like this next few months. I had 2 papers already, which are basically we are trying to understand better the genetics of feeding behavior broilers. That's one specific project that we are doing. Another project is measuring how can use the feeding behavior pattern to detect the risk of an animal dying the next day or the next few days. That's another project that I've been working on, and I will have results published pretty much soon. And also we are doing some methodological developments here, developing new machine learning methods using those kind of data as well. So far I got 3 main research projects that I'm intending to publish yet this year.
So the project that you're describing in terms of being able to take a measurement of feed intake, so I'd be curious in you describing how that's measured, and then taking that and saying, I guess you're developing some type of formula or algorithm to then say this particular bird could die within, as a mortality indicator. I'd be interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, each animal it visits the feeder, the electronic feeder, and each animal has a sensor that it emits a radio frequency signal, a unique feed radio frequency signal, and then we got the identification of the animal, how much time the animal spent at the feeder, the amount of feed that it got. So this is on a daily basis. Then we have hundreds or thousands of visit data for each animal. So we can describe different patterns, how many visits the animal had per day, how many feed it took, what was the difference between the first and the last visit during the day. So we have a time series for each animal, and we can see clearly that some animals that died during the experiment, they had less visits. The number of visits were starting to decrease. The amount of feed started to decrease as well. So we are kind of extracting features from those time series for different feeding behaviors, and we are trying to classify what is the risk of an animal dying like yesterday or from 3 days in advance. So we got pretty much interesting results because if you just classify at random, the percentage of mortality in this specific flock was like 3%, 3 to 5%, which is pretty low. But And then if we just try to classify it random, it was supposed to be our expected accuracy, right? 5 or 3%.
Okay.
And we got results like 60%, 50% of accuracy of classifying a dead bird, or the risk that the animal would be withdrawn because of some specific defect. So this is a pretty interesting project. We are also developing yet some methods to do that. And we are using specifically different machine learning algorithms. It's not just a formula.
Okay.
We use different machine learning algorithms that they can detect nonlinear relationships between the event, which is dead or alive, and the time series features that we are extracting or creating, depending on the data. So I'm actually still doing some analysis, but the results that I got so far are pretty promising.
It's definitely interesting work. In terms of application of this type of technology, 10 years, like how quickly do you think this technology would be expanded to, say, commercial scale production? Or is this type of technology more useful in, say, like a primary breeder setting where they are selecting for traits, so that you can, apply this where they are trying to select for, feed efficiency? How do you see this technology being applied within the poultry industry?
Yeah. I mean, the main interest was in feed efficiency, because when this specific company that started to measuring those kind of data, they started using those technologies, they were pretty much interested on feed efficiency, because I mean, today we select feed efficiency like residual feed intake, feed conversion rate based on caged animals. But it doesn't reflect the real conditions that the animal are being selected for. So it turns out that it may exist some interactions between the genetic merit of an animal select inside the cage and for animals raised in floors, right? On floors. So this was the motivation for starting selecting for group housed animals. So, but those kind of data, they are rich. They can generate a plethora of different information. So yeah, my first goal was, okay, selecting for feed efficiency, especially residual feed intake in animals raised on the floors. But then we started to see that we could do much more than that. So yeah, the first goal was selecting genetic selection for feed efficiency, but then we are starting to use those kind of data to for data-driven decisions, support data-driven decisions. And what I would say is that this kind of technology, it's not so easy to get right now. It's kind of it's pretty experimental, especially in broilers. We got some commercial electronic feeders for beef cattle, for pigs, but in broilers, it's not so common yet. So it's pretty much experimental, but I would say that it's really promising. So the result that I got so far, they are really promising, and it will justify the investment of the producer. And when we are talking about this specific project about classifying mortality risks, it's intended to be a tool for monitoring the herds in real time. I mean, if you if you get average percentage of mortality risks that can be considered normal, we don't have nothing to care about. But then if you have a flag telling you that the mortality risk on that specific herd is above the average, it would tell you that something is wrong. Could be a management issue, could be a disease outbreak. So I think that's pretty much important, and we hope that this kind of technology could be accessible for all farmers in the future. So
sounds like it could be a useful, extra monitoring tool in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the risk. We're really carefully examining biosecurity and how many times people come on and off a farm. And if you have these, sort of, sensors that are picking up this data instead of a person necessarily coming on and off the farm, then you can limit those, crosses over into the farm. I think that's really, really interesting work that you guys are conducting, and hopefully it can be expanded. In terms of the sensor on the broiler chicken itself, physically, where is the sensor placed?
it's a wing band, so it's on the wing.
Okay.
And it's like a small sensor, and it doesn't affect the animal behavior at all. So we've been performing some preliminary experiment, and it was concluded that it doesn't affect the animal's behavior, which is good. The only drawback, I would say, so is that each feeder allows only one single animal per time. So there are another electronic feeders that allow more than one animal per time, but they don't measure the feed intake. But in order to measure feed intake,
you've got to be individual.
Animals. It got to be individual. Yes, that's true.
That makes sense. And then in order to expand the technology, you just have to figure out how to record each slot in the feed pan, or somehow.
I would say that another interesting project that we are interested on is studying social interactions between those animals, because we've been noticing that some animals, they tend to try to invade the feeder when a specific animal is feeding. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to identify the merit for the social interaction, how aggressive an animal could be, and then trying to select against this kind of behavior. So, I mean, I would say that the possibilities are huge with those kind of sensor-based technology, especially radio frequency generated data.
And in terms of feeding, I think all of that, like you were saying, we've seen this in other species, and have used it. What other sort of sensor technology could you see being applied in the broiler industry? Or maybe other poultry. It could be turkeys or layers, or, where can this technology expand?
I see in the future a promising opportunity to use image-based classification predictions, especially the animal weight, the animal walkability. So those are kind of sensors that people are studying.
Okay.
And also audio generated data. For instance, we could install microphones in the pens and try to detect sneeze or another symptom of any kind of sickness, and then we can use those sensor-based technology to integrate all those kind of data to support data-driven decisions. So yeah, I would say pretty much radio frequency identification, image-based classification or prediction, and audio-based data. So those are, and we can also use accelerometers and other stuff that could measure the walkability of the animal, which is pretty much related with the some welfare condition, which, as I can notice, it's an important thing that industry is trying to reach right now. It's how can we improve the animal welfare without losing the weight production or the feed efficiency. So those kind of sensor-based technologies, they will help on that task.
And in terms of using it for welfare parameters, the video or image-based technology, how is that utilized? I understand it's probably on a research basis currently. Are there small cameras that are actually like set up? Are the birds pin, like, in a typical welfare assessment, you pin up a certain number of birds, you let them out and you walk, and it's a subjective, like the person auditor is evaluating that. So how does this technology then allow you, how does that capturing, what we would see as a gate issue?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much experimental right now. The main challenge is how to access each animal individually, because I mean,
right.
if we raise animals in pens, it could be 100 or 1,000 of animals in the same place. So it's challenging to measure each animal. But what I am not performing any kind of analysis in this nature right now. But what I've been reading about, it's that people are recording videos from the animal walking or behind the animal, and they are trying to measure some parameters that could indicate leg health or leg issues, because we are selecting for weight, and the weight could imply in reduced leg health. So they are trying to identify some leg health parameters based on image and based on video recording, which is great. I mean, I know that some researchers in the Netherlands, they are doing research related to that. What I'm trying to do right now is because since I know the identification of each feeder that the animal has access, I can compute the walked distance from feeder to feeder that each animal does during the day. So I'm averaging, I'm trying to leverage the total distance that the animal expand trying to hit the feed during the day. And we've been correlating, I correlate this kind of data with the leg health, with leg health traits, and there is a favorable genetic correlation. Even though it's weak, but still there is a favorable genetic correlation. If we improve for animals that walk more, we could reduce some leg issues on the long term. So, I mean, it's pretty much preliminary, but again, the results are promising.
It sounds like you could generate sort of a large library of data with some of this, technology. How is that data then interpreted? Like you were saying, the video, a person has to sit and watch it. And then you're clearly, analyzing this data. As this technology develops, what's the future in terms of like, is this going like to a cloud-based computer? Like how are how is it applied? If we're gonna expand it into commercial size production.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's another field of interest that we are doing some research here, especially João Doria's lab. They are investigating how to do real-time cloud computation. Right now, I mean, this is a big challenge because those kind of sensors, they are generating tons of data like in real time. So I would say that's we need to improve our ability to do those kind of transfer those kind of data online or in cloud computation. But right now, and it's interesting because I have like 50,000 of animals in my database, and right now I have like 90 millions of information, visit related data. So the challenge is huge.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot.
I would say that's the next step. I mean, we are trying to figure out how to use those kind of information, but in the near future, we have to sort of understand how to transfer it in real time,
right,
from computer to computer, right?
Yeah.
So that's an active research field right now in animal breeding and genetics, and another, especially in livestock precision.
There's definitely some key like hot topic areas that you're doing work on: precision farming, machine learning. I think that another area where you had talked about sort of the audio type of sensors, kicking that back into sort of the welfare arena. What about in terms of happy or content sounds, like that layers would make, or can we measure those types of things and give, our consumer wants to know that we're, everybody's happy in the environment we're raising them in. So could these sensors be used for that type of feedback as well?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, I've seen people working with those kind of data in pigs. Like they measure the pig vocalization, and then we can detect some patterns that indicate us if the pig is suffering stress, if the pig is relaxing. So those kind of research, they do exist already in pigs. And we could do the same in poultry. No problem. I mean, the animal also has some vocalizations that we could detect. We could record, and then we could use some audio-based algorithms to detect specific frequencies, and then try to classify the animal emotions. This has been doing with humans, with pigs. So I mean, it's pretty interesting, and I'm pretty much interested on how to use auto generate data to do those kind of decision. The real challenge is how to measure, which is subjective, how to measure the emotion of the animal, because in machine learning, we use basically two different algorithms. The unsupervised algorithms, where we do not have to provide any label for the algorithm. But then we have another class of algorithms that we call supervised algorithms, and we have to measure the target that we are interested on, so that we could train a specific algorithm so that it could make future predictions without seeing any data. So it has to learn from the past data so that we could predict future data. And then for doing so, we have to measure in the field the animal's emotion, which is, in my opinion,
That's difficult.
It's difficult, yeah, but it's a great idea.
It's just, I think our industry is, we're being asked to do lots of things. And I think the more we can generate data, like using this instead of subjective measurements, I think that's a great path for us to move into. And I'm really thankful, our industry is thankful that we have researchers like you working on these very high technology subjects. Thank you for your time being on the Poultry Podcast show today. If you have any questions for Anderson, I'm sure that you could locate him through the University of Wisconsin in Madison. You can find him there and read more about all of this cool technology research that their group is doing there. And with that, we will end today's episode. Thanks again for your time, Anderson.
Thank you very much for having me today, and it was a real pleasure to meet you today, Karen. And I would like to invite the Poultry Podcast for the invitation as well. And that's it. If you guys have any questions, I will be glad to answer those by email or any kind of platform that we can use. So
excellent.
So yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Make sure you tune in next time.